Okay, so today we're going deep on this whole Putin situation
Yeah.
and the hypersonic missiles and all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack, I think. The thing with Putin and these hypersonic missiles
Right.
is that everybody's kind of like, what is the truth here?
Yeah.
What are we really dealing with?
What is the reality? Are these just big claims that he's making?
Yeah, like
And
how much of it is just bluster and how much of it is real and really dangerous.
yeah, and I guess that's what we're gonna kind of try to do in this deep dive is like look at
Yeah.
what is he saying, what is he claiming,
Right.
and then like how is everybody else responding to that, and
Yes.
what does that mean for the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too because I think there's the immediate impact, like obviously on Ukraine,
Right.
and then there's kind of the ripple effect that this could have on global geopolitics and the economy and everything else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So let's start. I guess let's start with the missiles.
okay,
He's saying that he's got these hypersonic missiles that can strike Kyiv and
right, which is terrifying when you think about it. Like 5 times the speed of sound.
yeah,
Like,
basically impossible to stop.
how do you even defend against something like that?
Right. And like that's got to be just terrifying for people in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. Like I can't imagine just the level of anxiety and fear
Well,
that must create.
but then you've got all these people saying like, hold on a second.
Right.
Like, is this even real?
Right.
Are these missiles even,
Right.
what he's saying they are?
Like, do they actually exist?
yeah.
And do they have the capability that he's claiming?
Right. You got Ukrainian intelligence and, international experts, even in the U.S., that are saying, like, this could just be a bluff. This could be a way to,
Psychological warfare.
yeah, just like scare everybody.
Right.
So I guess like that's kind of the first question we got to grapple with is like,
Yeah.
is this real or not?
Right. And the thing is, like, we may not know for sure,
Right.
but like you said, we got to kind of game it out both ways.
Yeah.
Like, what if he's telling the truth? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then what if he's not?
So like, let's say he's telling the truth.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty significant shift in the balance of power, right?
Well, of course.
It means that Russia has a weapon that really nobody else has.
Right.
And that they could potentially use it to,
Right.
Devastating effect.
Right. And like, not just in Ukraine. I mean, they could have hit
Right.
pretty much anywhere in Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, with a hypersonic missile.
I mean, that's the whole thing with hypersonic missiles is that they have such a long range
Right.
that it really changes the whole strategic landscape.
And it just makes like defending against them almost
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah.
So like on a practical level, what does that even mean? Like, what are the implications?
Well, I mean, for Ukraine, it means that they're basically
Yeah.
defenseless against this kind of attack.
Right.
I mean, they don't have the technology to shoot down a hypersonic missile.
So even if they're getting, all the support from NATO and
Yeah.
all these other countries, it doesn't even.
It may not even matter
Yeah.
if Russia decides to use these things.
So it almost makes all that other stuff seem kind of pointless.
Right.
If you can just.
It kind of raises the stakes to
Yeah.
a whole other level.
Okay, so that's like the really scary scenario.
Right.
But what about the other side? Like, what if it is a bluff?
Well, then it becomes a question of credibility. I mean,
Oh.
if Putin is making these threats and it turns out he doesn't actually have the capability,
Yeah.
then it makes him look weak.
Right.
It makes Russia look like they're not the superpower that they claim to be.
It kind of undermines their whole tough guy image.
And like, what does that mean for their relationships with other countries?
Right. I mean, it could embolden countries that are already opposed to Russia.
Yeah.
It could make them less likely to take Russia's threat seriously in the future.
Right. So it's almost like a lose-lose for him either way.
Yeah, in a way.
Like if he uses them, then everybody's really scared.
Yeah.
And they're going to, double down on opposing him.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't use them and it turns out it was a bluff,
Right.
then he looks weak.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons why this whole situation is so tense.
Yeah. And then you add NATO into this whole mix.
Right.
I mean, they're the ones who are, supposedly protecting Europe.
Yeah.
But it's like, what can they even do?
Right.
I mean, they're in this really tough spot.
It's like a high wire act.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, they want to support Ukraine.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they don't want to provoke Russia.
Right. And it's like every move they make
Yeah.
could tip the balance one way or the other.
So what have they been doing so far? Like,
Well, they've been supplying Ukraine with weapons.
right.
things like Javelin anti-tank missiles,
Yeah.
Patriot air defense systems.
Yeah, I was reading about those.
Things to help them defend themselves.
Right.
But they've been very careful not to send in troops
Right.
or to get directly involved in the fighting.
Right, because that would be like World War III.
Exactly. And nobody wants that.
No.
So it's this very delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of people are wondering, like, how long can they keep this up?
Right, like how long can they keep supporting Ukraine without, pushing Putin too far?
And without putting their own countries at risk.
Right. And what do you think is like the most delicate part of this?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the whole issue of escalation. Like, how do you support Ukraine without escalating the conflict? Right.
I mean, every time NATO sends more weapons to Ukraine, Russia sees that as a provocation, and they threaten to respond.
So it's like this, constant back and forth.
It's a very dangerous game.
Yeah.
And it's one that I don't think anybody really knows how to play.
Okay, so we've talked about the military side of things.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the economy for a second.
Really?
Because this is having a huge impact on the global economy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we're already seeing it,
Yeah.
with inflation and all these supply chain issues.
Yeah, I mean, the sanctions on Russia are really starting to bite.
Right.
Their energy sector is taking a big hit.
Which makes sense. I mean, that's a huge part of their economy.
Exactly.
And it seems like they're having to rely more on, countries like China and North Korea.
Right.
Who are, not exactly the most stable allies.
No, not really.
So, like, how much pressure can their economy actually take?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, but it's definitely not sustainable in the long term.
Right.
I mean, they're burning through their reserves.
Yeah.
They're having to cut back on spending.
Right.
It's just not a good situation.
And it's not just Russia. I mean, it's like the whole world is feeling the effects.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Energy prices are up.
Right.
Food prices are up.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Ukraine.
Yeah.
They're like a major exporter of grain.
Right.
And now that's all disrupted.
So that's why food prices are going up.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was reading an article the other day about how wheat prices have just skyrocketed.
Right.
Because of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like, we all feel that when you go to the grocery store.
Yeah, it's not just some abstract economic concept. It's real.
It's like actually affecting, our daily lives.
Absolutely.
And it makes me wonder, like, what would all this look like if you know someone like Trump was in charge?
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, obviously he's not,
right.
But, it's a what if.
Yeah, like a hypothetical.
Yeah, like how would he have handled this?
Well, I mean, his approach to foreign policy was pretty different from what we're seeing now.
Yeah, he was all about, like, America first.
America first, transactional diplomacy.
Yeah.
He was very skeptical of NATO.
Right.
He didn't really see the value in these traditional alliances.
And he always seemed to be more interested in, like, making deals with people like Putin.
Right, like he seemed to admire strong men like Putin.
So, like, what do you think would be different?
Well, I think he would have been much less likely to support Ukraine militarily.
Right.
I think he would have been more focused on trying to cut a deal with Putin.
Right.
Maybe lifting some of the sanctions in exchange for something.
It's like he would have put, economic interests
right.
ahead of everything else.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment.
And maybe he would have pushed Europe to do more. Like, you guys got to step up and take care of this yourselves. Like, we're not going to be the world's policemen anymore.
Yeah, that was definitely a theme in his foreign policy.
Yeah, so it's like a totally different approach.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the outcome would have been,
right?
But it definitely would have been different.
Yeah, okay, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
I mean, this isn't the only conflict going on in the world.
No, not at all.
Like, you've got the whole thing between Lebanon and Israel.
Right.
Which is, always kind of on edge.
Yeah, it's a very fragile situation.
Yeah, and there was that ceasefire recently.
Right.
But it's like, how long is that going to last?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's been going on for so long.
Yeah.
And there's just so much mistrust on both sides.
Right. And it just seems like, it's so hard to achieve lasting peace in these kinds of situations.
Yeah. I mean, it takes more than just a ceasefire.
Right.
It takes a real commitment to addressing the underlying issues. The things that are actually causing the conflict.
Right. And the U.S. has historically played a big role in trying to mediate these kinds of disputes.
All right.
But it's like, is that even possible anymore?
I mean, it's definitely more challenging now than it used to be.
And then you've got Syria.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just a complete mess.
It's a total quagmire.
Yeah, I mean, you got the U.S. involved.
Yeah.
You've got Russia involved.
Yeah.
You've got Iran involved.
And all these different factions.
Yeah, it's like everybody's fighting everybody.
Yeah, it's a real proxy war.
And nobody knows how it's going to end.
Right.
And it just seems like all of these conflicts are kind of connected.
Yeah, they all feed into each other.
Yeah.
It's a very complex web.
Okay, so to wrap this all up.
Yeah.
We've got Putin making these, crazy threats.
Right.
We've got NATO trying to figure out how to respond.
Yeah.
We've got the global economy in a tailspin.
Yeah.
And it all just seems so uncertain.
It is a very uncertain time.
Yeah. And it's like, what does this all mean for us?
Right.
For like regular people.
Well, I think the main takeaway here is that what happens in Ukraine, it doesn't stay in Ukraine.
Right.
This has the potential to reshape the entire world.
Yeah.
The balance of power, the global economy.
Right.
Our alliances.
Right.
Everything could be different.
And it's like, how do we even prepare for that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's something we all need to be thinking about.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today.
Okay.
But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.